In the years following the Second World War, governments declassified thousands of documents, tribunals were held, and testimonies were recorded, and for most programs conducted under wartime conditions, some form of official accounting existed, incomplete, contested, but present. For Unit 731, that accounting never fully arrived. The researchers who worked inside Unit 731 were not prosecuted after the war. They returned to civilian life. Some entered medicine, some entered academia, and the data they collected, extracted from human subjects over more than a decade, was quietly transferred to those who wanted it. That transfer was the condition of their immunity. Unit 731 was established near Harbin in the early 1930s, presented outwardly as a water purification facility attached to the Imperial Japanese Army, and its actual function was different, operating under the direction of microbiologist Shiro Ishii as a long-term human experimentation program with no ethical framework, no external oversight, and no official record of its existence intended for public access. Subjects were referred to internally as maruta, logs, a classification that removed any legal or moral category from what was being done to them. And this was not informal language, it was operational terminology, used in documentation, in communication between staff, and in the structuring of procedures. What was being documented inside those walls was not medicine. It was a systematic study of how the human body fails and how that failure could be deliberately induced, controlled, and replicated at scale. The question that has never been fully answered is not what happened inside Unit 731. It is what happened to everything they learned. The experimentation at Unit 731 followed a structure that distinguished it from isolated incidents of wartime violence, and subjects were exposed to freezing temperatures in controlled sequences, immersed, partially thawed, re-exposed, with each stage documented to establish precise thresholds for tissue damage and organ failure. Because the goal was not observation of a single outcome, it was the refinement of a process. Infection-based experiments followed the same logic, and plague, cholera, typhoid, and anthrax were introduced under controlled conditions, but the parameters shifted between subjects, dosage, method of transmission, time of intervention, producing a dataset that tracked not just the presence of disease, but its progression, its variables, and its limits. Vivisection was conducted without anesthesia, and the stated reason, documented in recovered testimonies, was that chemical intervention would compromise the accuracy of internal observation, so organs were examined during active infection or physical trauma while subjects remained conscious. And this was not exceptional within the facility. It was routine. At a certain point, the operation expanded beyond the facility itself, and field operations were conducted in surrounding regions where plague-infected fleas were dispersed over civilian areas and water sources were deliberately contaminated, producing outbreaks that could be tracked and analyzed outside laboratory conditions, extending the system into the wider population without their knowledge and without any mechanism for accountability. This expansion indicates that Unit 731 was not solely a research program, and it was also a testing environment for methods of deployment, a distinction that matters because it means the objective included not just understanding biological effects, but learning how to distribute them. Estimates of total victims vary significantly, largely because the record was never complete to begin with, and the facility operated for over a decade, with the scale of its internal procedures combined with field operations across multiple regions, placing the number in the thousands, though the absence of full documentation means that figure remains contested. As Japan's position in the war deteriorated, documentation became less detailed, and orders moved away from research and towards something else: the management of what had been produced and the elimination of what could not be preserved. Shiro Ishii and the senior figures of Unit 731 were not brought before a tribunal, and while proceedings at Nuremberg established precedent for prosecuting wartime medical experimentation, the architects of Unit 731 were excluded from that process because the reason, according to multiple post-war accounts and partially declassified American intelligence files, was a negotiation. the research data in exchange for immunity. And that decision to acquire it and protect those who produced it was not accidental, it was a calculation. Former members of Unit 731 re-entered civilian society without public disclosure, holding positions in medical institutions and universities for decades, their connection to the program only becoming known through independent investigation long after their deaths. And over time, fragments continued to surface, but the complete picture has never emerged. Certain sections remain redacted, specific timelines contain gaps that have not been explained, and some records appear to have been removed entirely rather than withheld. The site near Harbin still stands, preserved in a state that reflects neither closure nor acknowledgement, and if the data was preserved, transferred, and integrated into subsequent research programs, then the program itself did not end in 1945. It continued under different names in different institutions with the same foundational material. And if that is the case, then the absence of a complete record is not a failure of documentation. It was the documentation working as intended.